Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Classic Gamer 74. I'm your host Anthony Gamer and I am Red the Fox, and today we're going to be discussing Atari 2600 prototypes, Part 5. In previous episodes we have discussed some of the games that were not released for the Atari 2600. Yeah, these are what you call prototypes, exactly. And many of these games that we have previewed in the past were working, close to working, or had actually been completed before they were canceled. Now the reason that many of these games were not released is because of the video game crash of 83 and 84. Yeah, a lot of games that did get released during that time were really bad, and they're part of the reason of the crash. Right, there were several factors that were involved and caused the video game crash, which you can find out about through various online resources, and in an interview that I conducted with Dan Kitchen, one of the programmers from Activision. Now the games that are going to be discussed in today's episodes are ones that were never completed, pretty much not even close to completed, never got past the planning stage, or ones that have never been dumped. Now, why don't you tell them what dump means? Right, because, I mean, they could take that another way. Exactly. Dump means that the games themselves were not made into ROMs and made available to the general public. In future episodes that we talk about prototypes, we'll be talking about prototypes that were made for other game systems. Oh yeah, what surprised me was how many of them that were made for the NES. Right, next to the NES, though, and of course the Atari 2600, I mean, we have pretty much made 5 episodes now dedicated to these prototypes. Another game system that had quite a few was the Sega Genesis, but we'll discuss that in a later episode.
Alright, so let's get started on what will be the final episode dedicated to Atari 2600 prototypes. And again, keep in mind that there are other prototypes and they will pop up in later episodes, but this will be the final one dedicated to prototypes as a whole. Alright, what we have first off is the game Care Bears. This was programmed by Laura Nikolic and was to be released in 1983 by Parker Brothers. Now the concept behind this game was to have these cute little bears, the Care Bears themselves, floating around, and you were supposed to grab their special tummy icons and I think put them with the correct bear. Yeah, now the Care Bears were pretty cool back in the 80s. They were, you know, these really cool toys that all the kids loved to have. They had really cute little icons on their bellies, and yeah, they were just lots of fun, and boys and girls alike loved these things, I tell you what. Well, unfortunately, the game itself never got past this kind of floating screen for various reasons. Even though the Strawberry Shortcake game had been a pretty big success for the most part, Parker Brothers decided to focus more on games for older kids. Thus, this game was canceled before it was completed. Alright, and next up there we have the game Caiphas. This game was supposed to be released by Apollo Games, and it was programmed by Tim Martin, and it was supposed to be released in 1982. Now, this game here, what you're supposed to be doing is going through this 3D maze of rooms, shooting lasers at these robots and monkeys, and yeah, it was quite interesting. The whole maze was going to be 64 rooms, and it looked like it was kind of a cool game, but of course it was a strange game because that's what Apollo Games generally made. In this demo you see here, all you got are some sound effects. You can walk from room to room, no hit detection or nothing else really, and you can kind of see the score is going kind of cattywampus there. Kind of a neat beginning, and I really would like to see what more some homebrew programmer can do with this thing. Okay, and next up we have Miss Piggys Wedding. This was set to be released in 1983 by Atari and was programmed by Suki Lee. Now this game kind of takes off from that last Muppet movie. What was it called? The Muppets Take Manhattan? Yeah, that was it. Okay, and what you're doing here in this game is you are Kermit the Frog, and you're trying to get out of your wedding to Miss Piggy. I guess he's having second thoughts, and he's trying to get out of there. So one person takes on the role of Kermit the Frog, and the other person takes on the role of Miss Piggy. Okay, now here's the game footage there. The boxes are, I think, other people trying to stop Kermit from getting out of there. There's Miss Piggy. There's really not much in the way of hit detection, and there's a key, and Gonzo keeps flipping out at the top, and I guess that taxi's where you're supposed to escape. So, had the game been completed, it probably would have been a cool two-player game. Okay, and next we have Squoosh. This was from Apollo Games, and it was set to be released in 1983, and its original title was That's Incredible. Boy, that took a lot of thought. Now, in this particular version of the prototype, what you're doing is walking around. You're supposed to be, I guess, like a French guy working in a wine factory, and that press thing is supposed to come down. All you can really do on this version is walk around and jump around. Okay, now in the second version of the prototype, I guess you're supposed to squish the grapes. Unfortunately, about the only thing you can do is get yourself squished and end up in the bottom vat. So it's hard to say what this game would have been like. Yeah, and like some of the other prototypes we've been watching so far, I'd like to see what some homebrew programmer can do with this with the existing code. I mean, who knows? It might be something really cool. Okay, and next up from 1983, we have Pompeii. Not much is really known about what this game was going to be. We suspect maybe it was going to be a treasure hunting game or a disaster game, as Pompeii was the site that was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius, an erupting volcano. As you can see, they have that part pretty well done in the background. What else is going on? We don't have a clue. Although this box may give you a little bit of an idea, it kind of looks like an Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, treasure hunting kind of deal. Now this was actually released by Apollo Games, this prototype box, as a good large percentage of the boxes and cartridges that you're going to see in today's episode are mock-ups made by fans, as none of these games really got completed, much less had a box or a cartridge for them. Alright, next up we have Frog Demo from Comavid, programmed by Dr. Joseph Beal in 1983, and that's all you can do is use your tongue. Can't catch anything, can't do anything. So, okay then. Now next up we have The Incredible Hulk. This was also set to be released in 1983. Now if you look at this page in the Parker Brothers catalog, it is right next to the Spider-Man game, which was released. If you leaf through this catalog, you'll find other games that were not released. However, years later, such as the McDonald's game and Lord of the Rings, the prototypes of these games did eventually appear. And here's a closer look at the game screen that was in the catalog. Most people believe that this game wasn't even started. That's why a prototype ROM hasn't been found anywhere. Now, of course, many of you know that somebody did make a homebrew, or should I say a hack, Frankenstein's monster, and called it The Incredible Hulk. And when the game was sold, they put it in the mock-up box that was created for the Incredible Hulk game that you saw down there at the bottom of the ad. So far, no other information is available about this. Maybe someday a prototype will pop up somewhere, or a demo or something, but so far all we have is this article and this one picture. Alright, and next we have Mark of the Mole. This was to be the first Atari game, or pretty much the first video game period, that was a tie-in to a rock band, that being The Residents. Now this game was actually being programmed by Mark Easter, and it was to be released from Atari in 1983. Now, the whole concept behind this game was from The Residents' 1981 album, Mark of the Mole. Now, in a previous episode, I had the pleasure and the privilege of being able to interview Homer Flynn, who is a spokesman for The Residents, and he gave me a little extra background information about this canceled game. Okay, now here's the description of the story behind Mark of the Mole, and I take this directly from AtariProtos.com. Mark of the Mole was the 8th album from the highly influential band The Residents, which was released in 1981. Mark of the Mole was a concept album which was billed as part 1 of a trilogy. 4 albums dealing with the moles would eventually be released. The album tells the story of a group of moles who come to the surface after their tunnels flood. The moles arrive in the land of the Chubs and are taken in to become laborers because the chubs hate hard labor. However, after a chub scientist invents a machine that can do the same labor the moles have been doing, they are now seen as a hindrance on the chub society. A brief war follows and ends in an uneasy truce with no clear victor. Now, in this game, what you're doing is trying to make music as you look at the top of the screen and you see these different colored blocks. You go up to the blocks and hit the side with your hammer, and then you try to repeat the melody that you see at the top. So for the most part, it's kind of one of those melody-making games. However, they did have bigger plans for the game had it been completed. Had the game been finished, they would have had additional levels where you would have to make the melody based on sound, not on color. The chubs would have came out and stole your hammer and some of your notes and all kinds of crazy stuff. Unfortunately, the prototype that exists only has the first level where you make the simple melody. And unfortunately, that prototype has not yet been dumped. So let's hope that someday we can actually play this game, those of us that are big Residence fans and others. But for the meantime, all we have are these still photos that you are looking at. All right, and next up we have Dune. This was to be released in 1984 by Atari and was based on the 1984 film. The film is based on the book Dune by Frank Herbert, which has been considered by fans and critics and educators alike to be one of the most iconic sci-fi books of all time. Unfortunately, sometimes a great novel does not make a great film, and this was definitely the case with Dune. Yeah, I tell you what, this movie bombed real bad, and it should have. That's 3 hours of my life I'll never get back. I have to agree with you on that one. I really did not care for the movie at all, and also for the fact it pretty much was also a launching pad for Sting's movie career. Oh, you mean a wrestler? No, the musician, the guy from the Police. Oh, okay, so I feel bad for him because I'm a Sting fan, and it's too bad that his first foray into movies was this terrible movie. I was going to use another word, but, I don't want to set off that cursing alarm again. Okay, now, without giving away too much of the plot of the book, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. The book was actually pretty cool, but I would not recommend the film at all. Now, in this prototype, you are taking on the role of the main protagonist named Paul, and you are trying to collect things to defeat your enemies, Baron Harkonnen, and you're trying to free Arrakis. Now, for the most part, this is kind of like adventure. You're going through a maze and you're collecting things, but you can only hold one thing at a time, kind of like adventure. And that's about it. Really, other than that, there is not very much hit detection. There's some errors here. And honestly, I think had the film actually done a little bit better, and if Atari hadn't had issues with their buyout, this game actually could have been kind of cool. But unfortunately, because of those factors and a few other things, all we're left with is this convoluted prototype with what might have been, on top of it. So, yeah, there were some pretty cool graphics. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of Adventure, which is a game I really enjoyed, and I know you did. Oh, yeah. But, it's just hard to say, what could have been. And honestly, from what we've seen so far, it does kind of push the limits of the 2600. So, like a lot of the other games here, maybe someday some homebrew programmer will get a hold of the code and do something with it. Now, next up, we have In Search of the Golden Skull. This was to be released by Mattel, M Network, and was programmed by Jerry Lawson. As many of you know, if you've watched other videos of ours, he was the creator of the Fairchild Channel F. He was a revolutionary game programmer, one of the first black game programmers, and he also was the creator of the Fairchild Channel F. Unfortunately, this game wasn't released. As a matter of fact, I think all that may exist is just this one screenshot. From what I've read, the game is supposed to be like a haunted mansion kind of thing. Really, I'm not really sure, as, like I said, the whereabouts of the prototype are pretty much in limbo somewhere. Unfortunately, Mr. Lawson passed away a few years ago, so if this game is ever found or where it is, as soon as I find out something, I will be sure and let you guys know. Alright, and next up from 1983, we have the Bear game, as it is commonly known, and it was to be released by Sega and was programmed by Fred Mack. Unfortunately, all we have are a couple screenshots. Now, according to what we read, what you're supposed to be doing is shooting at this bear, and when you shoot him, he's supposed to go to the right and pick up these honeycombs and the money, or something like that. Now, unfortunately, like I said, the game itself hasn't been dumped, so we don't really know too much about it. Other than the fact that, yeah, you're shooting at the bear and, you can't shoot him too much because then he turns around and bites you. No, he doesn't. Well, I mean, that would have made the game more interesting. That's true. Hopefully someday the ROM of this will be dumped and you can try it out for yourself. It may be the only time in your life you'd be able to shoot at a bear with a pea shooter and not have the bear turn around and maul you to death. And last, but certainly least, oh, that's cold. Well, look at the game. Oh, yeah. Was a Sword Quest Airworld. This was to be programmed by Todd Fry and released in 1983. Now, I say least because I absolutely hated the Sword Quest series. And I wasn't about to get the last game had it ever been released, as I didn't like the other three. Now, many of you that were around back in those days probably remember that they had a contest going with these Sword Quest games, and you could get these really fabulous prizes. Actually, they should have given you money just for playing these games. Oh, yeah, I mean, none of them were really all that great. Although the third game actually is quite valuable and collectible. That's true. Now, from what I understand, the concept in this game, this final game, was you were flying around in some first-person scenario and dodging stuff in the air, picking up stuff. And I don't really think they had much of a storyline for this one, as there was a comic book that came with the other three games. And I think that's about as far as they got before the game was canceled, the series was canceled, and most of us would like to pretend it never happened. But still, I would have liked to have seen what this game had in store for us. Who knows, it may have been pretty cool, and the series itself could have ended on a high note instead of ending with a sour taste in a bunch of gamers' mouths, like it did.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Classic Gamer 74. I really hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give us a great big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to click that little bell icon down there so you'll be notified when we upload new videos. And please help us out on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can help this channel to grow. So please, be generous and help us out on Patreon. The link is in the description below.
In our next episode, we will have Atari games from the deep. Yes, we will have Atari games that take place in the ocean, so you will not want to miss that.
Well, until next time, I'm Anthony Gamer, and I'm Red Fox, and we will see each and every one of you in the next episode. Until then, have yourselves a great day. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.